There is a verse buried in the middle of Jonah's prayer that almost nobody preaches. He is at the bottom of the sea, seaweed wrapped around his head, the waters closing over him, sinking by his own choice to the roots of the mountains. And in that moment, he says something you would not expect a drowning man to say. He does not cry out, "Save me." He does not say, "I'm sorry." At least not first. The first thing he says is this: those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. Stop and think about that. A man at rock bottom, a man who has run from God, a man being judged for his disobedience. And the first lesson he names, the first thing he learned in the belly of the fish is not about sin. It is about idols, and it is about grace. Today, in the Dangerous Game series, we're going to look at one of the most important verses in the entire Old Testament on the subject of sin, and the lesson that pulled Jonah out of the deep. Because if you've been listening to this series, you already know the question: what is sitting on the throne of your heart? And today we ask the follow-up: what does it cost you when something else is sitting there? Jonah ran from God. The text does not tell us exactly why. Maybe it was his comfort. Maybe it was his pride. He did not want to preach to enemies he hoped God would destroy. Or maybe it was his reputation, or maybe it was his sense of national identity. We do not know. But here is what we do know. Nobody runs from God toward nothing. When you run from God, you're always running towards something. You cannot serve God and mammon, Jesus said. You cannot worship the true God and a counterfeit at the same time. Your heart has one throne, and whatever sits on that throne becomes the thing you run toward, and the thing you run from God for. That is what the Bible calls an idol, not a statue, not a piece of carved wood. An idol is anything you trust, treasure, or turn to in the place where God belongs. And Jonah had one. We do not know what it was, but you know what yours is. If you stop right now and ask the question honestly, what is the one thing in my life that I would not give up, even if God asked me to? That is your idol. That is the thing you're running toward when you're running from God. And here is what most people get wrong about idols. They think idols are a sin problem, a behavioral problem, something you need to confess and stop. But Jonah does not say that. Jonah says, those who cling to worthless idols forfeit the grace that could be theirs. The word he uses is forfeit. You do not just sin when you cling to idols. You forfeit something. You give up something you could have had. And what you forfeit is grace. Think about that. Every time you put something in the place of God, your career, your relationship, your reputation, your comfort, your image, you're not just disobeying, you're walking away from grace that was available to you. This is what Tim Keller meant when he said, sin is more than rule breaking. This is what Jeremiah meant when he called idols broken cisterns that cannot hold water. You're not just choosing the wrong thing. You're leaving behind the only thing that could actually fill you. That is why Jonah ended up at the bottom of the sea. Not because God was punishing him for disobedience, though he was disciplining him, but because the moment Jonah ran toward his idol, he was already drowning. The sea just made it visible. The first step out of the mess is to know the mess you are in. Jonah figured it out in the belly of the fish. The prodigal son figured it out in a pig pen. The Bible says when he came to his senses, talking about the prodigal son, notice that. He had to come to his senses. which means he had been out of them. That is what idols do. They put you out of your senses. They distort your judgment. They make you believe the finite thing can carry the weight of an infinite need. And you will not come back to your senses until something breaks the illusion. For Jonah, it was a storm and a fish. For the prodigal, it was hunger and shame. For some of us, it is the moment we finally get the thing we've been chasing and discover that it does not satisfy. For others, it is the moment we lose it and realize we had given it more of our soul than it ever deserved. God, in His mercy, will often let you sink just deep enough to see what you have been clinging to. That is not cruelty, that is grace. Now, here is where Jonah's prayer turns. He has named his idolatry. He has come to his senses. And then he says something that should stop us. But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you what I have vowed I will make good. I will say, salvation comes from the Lord. That is the second half of the light bulb moment. He has seen the worthlessness of his idols, and now he sees the worth of God's grace. The German theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer called this costly grace. He wrote, costly grace is the gospel which must be sought again and again. Such grace is costly because it calls us to follow. And it is grace because it calls us to follow Jesus Christ. It is costly because it costs a man his life. And it is grace because it gives a man the only true life. Above all, it is costly because it cost God the life of His Son. This is what Jonah understood at the bottom of the sea. Grace is not cheap. Grace is not the absence of consequences. Grace is not God overlooking your idols. Grace is God paying for them with His own blood. The moment Jonah understood that, the moment he stopped treating God's mercy as something he was owed and started treating it as something that cost everything, the text says, the Bible says, and the Lord commanded the fish and it vomited Jonah onto the dry land. Jonah learned the lesson. It's as though God's saying to the fish, he has learned his lesson now. You can vomit him. And the rescue came. But there is something we have to see before we end. Jonah was rescued from the depths. Jesus was not. When Christ went to the cross, He went into a deeper darkness than Jonah ever knew. Psalm 88 is one of the psalms many believe that Jesus prayed at Calvary. Listen to its words. You have put me in the lowest pit, in the darkest depths. Your wrath lies heavily on me. You overwhelm me with all your waves, but I cry to you for help, Lord. In the morning my prayer comes before you. Why, Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me? Jesus cried out to the Father, just like Jonah did. But the answer was silence. The Father turned His face away, because at that moment, the Son was carrying the weight of every idol every human heart has ever clung to. Yours, mine, Jonah's. And the Father, in perfect holiness, could not look. This is the costliness of grace. Jonah was vomited onto the dry land because Jesus Christ was nailed to a cross. Jonah was rescued from the deep because Christ was abandoned in it. Jonah heard the silence break because for 3 hours of darkness on Calvary, the Son of God heard only silence. That is the gospel. That is the grace that Jonah forfeited every time he ran toward an idol, and the grace that was offered back to him at the bottom of the sea. So I want to ask you the question Jonah had to answer. What are you clinging on to right now that is forfeiting the grace that could be yours? It might be a career, it might be a relationship, it might be a sin you've made peace with. It might be a reputation you cannot let go of. It might be a wound you are refusing to bring to God. Whatever it is not worth what it is costing you. The grace of God is available. It is costly. It costs the life of the Son, because it is offered freely to anyone who will let go of their idols. And say with Jonah, salvation comes from the Lord. That is the way out. There is no other. I hope that's an encouragement for you. Thanks for watching. God bless.